Aristotle's theories have gone by the wayside, this one seems to hold up over the centuries. Excuse me. First kind of friendships is a utility friendship. How many of you here, when you were in the workplace, had friends at work? How many of you see those people on a regular basis now? How many of you would say that you're friends with your doctor? Yeah. But when you change doctors, how often do you see that person after that? See, a utility friendship is based upon mutual receipt of either goods or services. It's based on, I get something, you get something out of this. That's a utility friendship, based on mutual benefit. Now, I have to hang my head a little bit when I say this as I apply it to our church situation. But a couple of decades ago, we were part of a church that had a very active personal work ministry. And that was great in and of itself. The elder who oversaw that particular ministry was a sales manager for a large insurance firm, and I will tell you that a lot of our meetings seemed an awful lot like a sales meeting. And we would go charging out, and we'd have our list of people that we would go see. And we would go in and we would talk with them, and we're successful in many cases getting them to church, getting them in, getting them wet. And then guess what? They were right out the back door. You see, that was kind of a utility friendship. We met a need, they met a need, we got our tote board checked off. They had some fellowship for a while until they decided, well, we're not getting anything more out of this. And we would lose them. They would leave. They would go somewhere else or go back to what they had been doing, because the utility of that friendship, the utility of that relationship was no longer there. We'd get them in the door, the front door, and they were out the back door fairly quickly. Now, I'm not saying that utility friendships are bad. I'm glad that I'm friendly, on a friendly basis with my doctor. I'm glad that I had the relationships that I had with my coworkers over the years. It's been great. But that's not the stuff of a long-lasting relationship. Then there are pleasure friendships. These pleasure friendships are based on a mutual interest, something that you do for fun, some kind of a pleasure activity. Ruth and I are part of a camping club. We like to go camping with several people. And I love them dearly. But over time, as some of them have gone on and done some other things, really don't see them all that often, unless there's something else that develops with it. Maybe that sports team, that championship team that you were on years ago in high school or in college, really don't see them because everybody's got their own lives now. The guys that you like to go to the ball game with, that other dad on the little league team who you and the boys go to the ball game, but then the boys move on to other things, and well, so does the friendship. No, the friendships that Aristotle said that are lasting, and he said that probably for most people there'd be less than a dozen of these in somebody's life. The pure friendship, based on mutual appreciation of the qualities of one another. It's the people and their qualities that motivate people to stay together. I think, next, this is what Paul was talking about in Philippians 2, verses 3 and 4. When he says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself, not looking to your own interests, but looking to the interests of others. And wouldn't that be a great situation if Ron and I are looking out for each other? Back it up, please. There we go. If Ron and I are looking out after each other, I'm looking out after his interests, he's looking out after mine. In the military, we called it having each other's back. And being a veteran myself, being a military retiree, I can tell you that there's some of the friendships I had in the Air Force that I think come very close to this, because we had each other's back under some very tense situations from time to time. And I think we began to appreciate each other for the inherent values and not just going to the ball games, or I get something and you get something. But I've also seen it in the church. Not looking out after your interests, but looking out after the interests. But now that doesn't say that I'm not to look out after my interests. It doesn't say I'm not to look out after my family's interests. In fact, the Bible will tell us elsewhere that a person who doesn't take care of his own family is worse than an infidel. So we have to take care of our own families. But the whole point is that we put other people ahead of ourselves. And I think that's what Aristotle was talking about when he was talking about the pure friendship, which is, can be fairly rare unless you're a Christian. Understand, Aristotle was not a Christian. And so to the non-Christian, this would be rare. But as Christians, this is what we're to be shooting for. Next. In the church, Jesus and God call us to develop what Aristotle referred to as the pure friendships. And the question that, since this was pointed out to me some time ago, that I'm looking at is, what do my friendships look like? And I would challenge you to ask, what do your friendships look like? Are they utility friendships? That's okay. Are they social friendships, pleasure friendships? How many pure friendships do you have? What are your friendships based on? How long is that going to last? Because you see, as Christians, one of our responsibility, as we talk about in Hebrews 10:24 and 25, is to consider ways that we can encourage one another. That's to be one of our jobs. And we're to meet, not just to worship, but to encourage one. We have a fellowship. And I know some people say, oh, fellowship, that's optional activity. I don't need to go do that. Yeah, you do. Because that's a time where we build each other up and we encourage one another and we do those kinds of things. Now, yes, Richard.
Like that within a congregation of any size, this is a good example. There's probably all three of those examples. Each of us probably have circles of friends that would fit into each of those categories. But I think we probably should also ask ourselves, we have certain group of those pure friendships, but what is the cause of that pure friendship? Is it based on the mutual benefit that became mutual interest and pleasurable interest, and then it just developed into that? I think what God is calling us to do is to develop those pure friendships, not just let them happen naturally, but to seek out opportunities to be a pure friend to everybody in the congregation as much as is possible. In a large group, it's not possible, obviously. But
Richard's obviously read my notes. That was a great segue, by the way, and I'll pay you off when we're done here. My brother, John Shackleford, also one of our shepherds here, has a model that he's shown us several times where it talks about cultivating these relationships. It starts with activity. It starts with that utility or social or fun kind of relationship. And the longer you're around people, as you begin to work on these relationships and develop these relationships, you get to the point where people are more comfortable with you. And then they begin to trust you. I mean, when you first come in, you're not sure if you can trust these people or not. Can I tell these people my deep, dark secrets? Are they going to handle it right? Because we're all flawed individuals, I will tell you that. Then from trust, we take it even further, where not only do they trust, but then they're willing to confide. Then you have opportunity beyond that. And so developing these friendships, you're absolutely right, Richard. This isn't something that you just walk into and say, oh, there's my pure friendship over there. These are things that work and take time and take association. Yes, Ron.
Very strong need to define the church when we're trying to attract new people and so forth, and even the existing people. Instead of the church being the building where you come and check off, in fact, we're here for the week. Right. You know, that we are fingers and toes and eyes and ears out there in the community, being somebody for the Lord. And the church is always people. It's not brick and mortar.
Bob makes a very good point. The church is a collection of people. The church is the people. All too often, and I'm guilty of it as well, refer to the building as the church building and sometimes shorten that to church. But the church is the people, as we have found out in this last year and a half when things have been so shut down and we've been able to connect not only electronically but over the phone. We really haven't been gathering here in this building. But the church is the people, and that's what it's all about. What else? Great points, Diane.
I was just thinking back on some of the relationships and places where we live. It seemed like the people that we worked together on some project, maybe we went on a mission, maybe we went out and fed the homeless together. Some activity in the church that we worked together, those are the ones that I came closest to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's because you learned, like I was giving the military example, because you've worked with them, you've learned to appreciate them and their heart, and you've seen them in action, you've seen them put their Christianity on display. If I understand what you're saying, and that does allow us to build and deepen those relationships and those friendships till we get to that point. I thought I saw another hand, yes.
I think there's one word that comes to my mind when we talk about that third level of friendship,
Okay.
and that's unselfish. I think if you look at that level of friendship, one friend is looking out for the other, is putting the other one first. I think Jesus taught that. Mm-hmm. And that if we can develop and maintain an unselfish attitude, that's going to lead us to having this highest level of friendship. Right. And I think the world needs to see that Christians are unselfish people. And you demonstrate that in a lot of ways. Some of them are very small. For example, opening a door for somebody is pretty easy.
Sure.
But some people need that kind of help, and when it happens, I've noticed they're kind of astonished. Oh, thank you for opening that door. And I'm thinking, well, isn't that what we're supposed to do? Well, in today's culture, you're talking about our culture. That's not necessarily something people would do, and yet for that individual that needs that extra help, that's a big thing.
Oh, yeah, it's a huge deal. For those of you who might not have been able to hear what Monty was talking about, that the key word in all of that for that pure friendship is unselfishness, not being selfish, looking out after others first, and then those things become mutual. Anybody here ever been unselfish towards somebody that they didn't reciprocate? Sure we have. I mean, that's happened to all of us, right? But does that mean that we're to quit doing that? No, not at all. And so what we have to do then is we look towards being that model out of Philippians, looking out after the interests of others, and eventually it'll catch on. But as Richard pointed out, these relationships develop. You don't just walk into them; they will develop, though. So we've talked about what is truth. We've talked about it's the Bible truths, it's the rules and those sorts of things. And we've talked about grace. So what happens if we have truth without without grace? Well, all too often, truth without grace leads to rebellion. A 2-year-old, you say, don't touch that. What's that 2-year-old going to do? They're going to touch it. They want to touch it. They got to touch it. Okay? It can also lead to an attitude of lying just to get you off their back. Anybody here ever been or had a teenager that maybe stretched the truth a little bit just to get you off their back? Did you get that homework done? Oh yeah, no problem. We're there. We're good. Did you study for your test? Righto, sure did. Yep, we're ready. From some of your reaction, I think maybe more than just me's been there. What we don't want to do, though, is to develop this to a point as we're going out and trying to, as we say in our kind of our overarching theme here, help create passionate followers of Christ. We don't want it to be to the point where they're lying just to get us off their back. We want to make sure that we incorporate the grace. As with a teenager, if you have truth without grace, if you have truth or rules without the grace or the relationship, what you end up with is rebellion and estrangement. And that's not what we're here for. We're here to be a shining light to the world, not to send people, not to push people out into the world. So, but what happens if all we're doing is grace without the truth? I think we see a lot of that already. They can say, yeah, I believe in Jesus, but because once saved, always saved, I can do whatever I want. It really doesn't matter. Or they'll get little snippets here and there to come in. They'll come in and feel good, but not enough to make them different. They'll come in and kind of get their pep rally, but not enough. And just like a flu shot, sometimes grace without truth can make people immune to the truth. And we don't want that either. Grace without truth says, as long as I'm happy, or as long as you're happy, it doesn't matter. Yes, Ron?
In my younger days, you just said something that reminded me that there were doctrines that people held to, and that was sufficient for them. But nowadays, I think it's more of a personal, whatever I want it to be, as far as my religion goes. Yeah, I know there's a Jesus, and I believe in him, but whatever I want to believe is okay because it's my choice or whatever. That kind of freedom of thought. Who can say, you're talking about lying, who can say that they believe in Jesus if they've never opened that book called the Bible? Mm-hmm. How can they even consider saying that, I guess?
Good question. Richard?
Phrase that you hear a lot is, I believe in God, but I don't believe in religion. Or I'm opposed to religion. The truth of the matter is the belief in God gives them comfort, but the religion puts a structure on them. They don't want that. They don't want
I've heard that. I believe in God. I'm a follower of Jesus, but you know what? Organized religion, I'm just not here for.
I'm being honest. I believe that our faith should be based on the Bible, and that should be it, not based on religious principles.
Well, and again, yeah, and let me delineate that a little bit. I'm talking about as Christians, we do follow the Bible. That's what we follow. That's it. And as we talked about with the Hebrews 10, 24, and 25 example, as this body or community of believers, there's tremendous advantage, tremendous benefit to gathering together to encourage one another, because I got to tell you, and we all know it, it's a cold, dark world out there, and it's very difficult to maintain your religion, if you will, or maintain your faith when you go out and see all the horrible things that happen on a day-to-day basis. And so man's organization, man's traditions by themselves, I agree with you. And if we're going to make traditions a part of the deal, then I totally agree. But what we're trying to do here is operate purely off of the scriptures. Yes, sir.
And that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Absolutely.
And I think we all get that. And I think that's very true in today's society.
That's the balance of grace and truth.
I think that when you're trying to appeal to somebody today to bring them to Jesus, they need to know that he cares as well, and that he has a personal relationship with them that he wants to have stronger. So our relationship with them becomes hopefully a model for how Jesus would want to have a relationship with them. So
Right. Yeah, the relationship.
had structure. Jesus had structure. And so the point you were making about religion, we're not trying to impose religion. We're trying to say, here's the structure that Jesus put around you, and it's all based on how much he loves you, not because he just wants to give you rules.
Yeah, very good point. Anybody else? So anyway, grace without truth, kind of ends up with, as long as you don't hurt anybody, it doesn't matter what you do. Well, that's again, that just doesn't work. Next, please. Our challenge is to balance grace and truth. We can't do all grace. We can't do all truth. As Jesus did it, it is a balance of truth and grace. Yes, Richard.
I would say if you're balancing something, you're thinking about they're on opposite ends of a fulcrum. I would say not only do you want that balance, but you want them incorporated. You want the two incorporated together.
Right. And that's absolutely true. And how do you balance those things? It depends on who you're talking with. It depends on the relationship that you already have with them. For example, you may have already may have enough grace or relationship with that person that you may want to emphasize truth, and vice versa. Somebody you don't know, you're going to have to build up that relation. Why do you suppose it is that everybody at Thanksgiving and Christmas says, well, whenever you go to dinner, what are the two things they tell you not to talk about? Religion and politics. Don't do that. Okay? Infers you don't have enough, that these people are gathering together for these big dinners, don't have enough relationship to be able to tolerate those things. Sad but true. Back it up one. Our challenge is to go in and balance all this. There's a passage in 1 Thessalonians, and I'd like to direct your attention to it. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 11 and 12. And what Paul tells the Thessalonians, and make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. You should mind your own business and work with your hands, just as we told you, so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders, and so that you will not be dependent upon anybody. This is Paul's instructions to the Thessalonians. And I've had some people say, well, Bill's kind of reserved and quiet sometimes, so he's just living his quiet life. That's not what this is talking about, although if I can be used as a biblical example, okay. But leading a quiet life, not causing controversy, not stirring things up. Pete, I know in your time with the NYPD, you ran across people that all they want to do is stir things up, right? All the time. Leading a quiet life, not going out, stirring people up, disaffecting people, things like that. Mind your own business. That rules out gossips, right? Take charge of your own life. Handle your own problems. Work with your hands. I think this was prior to the internet and the computer age. But what it's saying is engage yourself in worthwhile toil. Don't be out trying to do things. You know, there's an ancient Jewish proverb that goes something like this, that a father who doesn't teach his son a trade trains up a thief. And what I think they're referring to here is find honest employment, find honest work. And the whole idea here is that when you do these things, people around you are going to see that and notice. Why do you think Paul was a tent maker? He didn't require financial support from anybody. He did that so that he could win the respect of outsiders, knowing that they weren't coming to him always looking for money. I had a business associate when I was in the construction business who hated to go to church, hated to go to the services of the church that he was a member of. He said, all they want to do is they want money from me. Whenever I walk in the door, everything they want is money, money, money. We can't do that. If we're minding our own business, those sorts of things, then we're balancing this grace and truth. We don't put things out there that would balance or affect or imbalance that relationship. Okay, there we go. Again, the community of believers should be a warm and inviting place. Is it logical for us to expect that a sinner will have corrected all of their behaviors before they begin associating with us? I mean, is this where we bring all the good people, right? No. We are a place where we bring people in, we develop relationships, and we help to create passionate followers of Christ. We're here, as Jesus was, to seek and save the lost, not to be served, but to serve. Let's take a look at the example of Zacchaeus. And later, if we have time, we'll talk a little bit about the woman caught in adultery. My good friend Zacchaeus, we read that Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through, and a man by the name of Zacchaeus was there, and he was the chief tax collector. By the way, how did tax collectors get paid back then? They got paid by charging a commission or skimming off the top. Rome would tell them how much the taxes were, and then they could mark it up however much he wanted to, and then that was what they took, right? He was chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, couldn't climb over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. Next, when Jesus reached the spot, he looked up to him and said, "Zacchaeus, come down." Now, we've all sang the song, right? He said, "I must stay at your house today." Did Jesus launch into a sermon about stealing? Did Jesus launch into a sermon about being mean to other people? No. He said, "I'm coming to your house, and by the way, you're buying lunch." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly, and all the people saw this and began to mutter, "He has gone to be the guest of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, here and now I will give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Every time I've read that, I kind of stop right there. And Zacchaeus says, if I've cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4. Why would he say that? By using that word if. Ron?
Guys say, if I have offended you, I'm sorry.
Kind of personal protection?
If I did. I may not have, but...
Yeah. Richard, your hand, around here you raise your hand, it's like at an auction. Here's my thought on that, and Ron, you're probably right. Here's my thought. If somebody's engaged in sin, if somebody's doing something wrong, would it be unusual for them to not even realize that what they were doing was wrong? Oh, you mean you can't do that? Or that wasn't right? Or that was cheating? I'm not sure Zacchaeus even knew that some of his practices were wrong. And sometimes when we engage with sinners, sometimes we have to teach them more perfectly so that they understand the acceptable behaviors and what they need to be doing. But Zacchaeus said, if I did that, I'll pay it back. And then what did Jesus say? Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. In subsequent weeks, and put it on the last one, we'll hold it there because we're about out of time. In subsequent weeks, we're going to take a little harder look and we're going to drill down a little more about who are we called to be. Today's been an introduction to kind of give you the general idea and the general theme that we're going to be going on. We're going to be drawing from a number of Bible references, but we're going to center on the pastoral epistles. We're going to center on 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus, and just to kind of give you a preview of coming attractions. 1st Timothy, who has a pretty good background, we'll talk about it. He was sent to minister in the city of Ephesus, which also happened to be the center of worship of the goddess Diana. You won't find this in the Bible, but historians record that at the age of 80, Timothy was trampled in the street as he was attempting to preach from the street to a passing parade of worshipers of Diana, who got frustrated with him and threw him down in the street and then trampled him to death. It was not an easy time for Timothy there in Ephesus. Titus, who we will also talk about, was sent to the island of Crete. Crete, by their own philosopher, said that Cretans are ugly, vicious liars and cheats. And that was their own people describing them. How'd you like that guy to be writing for your Chamber of Commerce? So we're going to look at the guidance that Paul gave to both Timothy and Titus, and then we will begin to apply that and begin to look at how can we apply these lessons to the world we live in today. Anybody got any other thoughts or observations or comments? Well, I appreciate your attention, and to those out in cyber world out there, we're glad that you were with us as well, and we will